Okay, our next event segment today is transportation equity and accessibility. And one of our speakers, Holly and a Little Bull with the Northwest Tribal Transportation Assistance Program, a Yakima tribe member, has not been able to attend today due to an illness. And we do have Cecilia Black and Amara Schemerhorn from Disability and Mobility Initiative who are here to speak today. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much for joining us again. And Luis introduced Cecilia and Amara, who will be talking to us about something that people don't think about, I think, quite as much, which is the whole question of accessibility. I don't think that people think quite as much about accessibility and about equity. And so that's what this panel is about. Unfortunately, our other speaker is unable to attend due to an illness, but we wanted to talk about that. I will start by asking a very simple question and also a comment, which is that you may or may not know that something like 30% of the American population does not drive. And there are lots of reasons for that. Either they're too old, they're too young, they're too poor, they live in places where transportation is not very accessible, or because they're just concerned about the future of the planet. And so what I would like to start by asking is our friends here are part of an organization called Disability Mobility Initiative, which has done, you may have heard, they've been doing some really exciting things. For the last couple of years, they've done something called the Week Without Driving. So what I'd like to do is have you start by explaining what that program is, how it works, and how successful it's been.
Yeah, my name's Cecilia Black, and I am a community organizer with Disability Mobility Initiative, which is a program run out of Disability Rights Washington, and we organize disabled transit activists across the state. We have over 200 people from every single legislative district represented. We launched, sorry, I know I'm very quiet, so I will try to project as much as I can. But my boss, Anna Zyberts, launched Disability Mobility Initiative out of Disability Rights Washington in 2020. And one of the programs that we've run and started, this was our third year, was Week Without Driving. It started, the first 2 years was just in Washington State, and we challenged our electeds across the state to not drive for a week. And one of the huge issues in transportation is that people with disabilities and non-drivers are not represented in our elected leaders, and there is just so much knowledge that comes from experience and using the transportation system. And there's so many missing pieces that are hard to think about when thinking about bus services and trains. Those are like really big concepts that are pretty easy to understand. But to actually use the train or use the bus or the light rail to get from where you need to go to a doctor's appointment or to go to work, there's so many pieces to that is really hard to understand those nuances if you're not using those systems. And so we started Week Without Driving. This was our third year. The first 2 years was just in Washington State. And this past year, we went national and partnered with America Walks, a national organization. And we had over 350 elected officials participate across the U.S. 3 states, Washington, Texas, and New Hampshire, issued statewide proclamations for Week Without Driving. We had people and organizations in 41 states participated, over, I think, 400 activists and over 120 local organizations participating with Without Driving. And so, every year more and more people and electeds participate. It's kind of this week that's really took on momentum, and it's been, like, I think, pretty eye-opening for a lot of legislators and electeds that we talk to just really understand, not just we need more light rail service, but the sidewalks to get to this light rail are equally as important as the actual, like, train itself, or the bus shelters, or the elevator maintenance. Those are all pieces that are can be small, seem small, but are just as significant to accessing transit as these, like, big systems.
That's great. And I know, Amara, do you have other things you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. Oh. No problem. So my name is Amara Skirmerhorn, and I'm a seminar coordinator with Disability Mobility Initiative. And I agree with everything Cecilia said, especially with connecting communities through Week Without Driving, because something that DMI has done, along with Disability Rights Washington and Front and Centered, which is another local organization dedicated to representing underserved communities in policy change. We have a coalition called Empower Movement Washington, which is dedicated to sharing stories from these intersectional communities, specifically people of color and people with disabilities. And one of our biggest focuses, of course, has been connecting communities. So we hope, like, through Not Driving for a Week, that people who participate will notice, not just like the physical barriers of broken sidewalks between bus stops, or how quickly you can get to the light rail station, which, then connects you to the Sounder station, which then, takes you to South King County, or up north farther from Seattle. We hope that, through doing this challenge, that people can see how a lack of connectivity in transit prevents people from accessing necessities, on demand, like with fixed route service. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I would just add that it really is about, I mean, a lot of the folks in this room are excited about trains and improving trains, which absolutely, we're all in favor of that. But it also needs, I used to say, it's part of a balanced breakfast. It's part of an entire a way of a network, okay, of connecting people, which, as you say, starts with sidewalks, it starts with local buses, it starts with paratransit, it starts with everything to get around on the local level. And then how do you get to the next city over? I know one of the folks who works with All Aboard Washington will tell you she works for a paratransit agency. And, she gets frustrated because people will call her and say, yes, I want to go to Oregon, or I want to go to the next county over. And she can't do it because she can only serve the taxing district of, in her case, King County Metro. So, it's those kinds of things that people don't think about. It's like, how would you get from point A to point B? When I have a meeting with local organizations like the Rotary Club or things like that, I will start by saying, now, let's say your kids or your grandkids want to go to WSU in Pullman, okay, from this part of the state. We start by looking at Google, and it's like, all right, If you want to get from, let's say, Edmonds to, or Centralia to Pullman, how do you do it? How long does it take? If you drive, it takes maybe 4 or 5 hours. If you don't drive, it's probably tomorrow before you get there, if you can do it at all. So those are the kinds of, I think, things that the Week Without Driving does a really good job of showing how inequitable transportation is for for those of us who don't drive. And, you know, as we all get older, there are going to be more and more people who are in that category. So that's something that I always think about. So talk to us about how you got from doing this on the state level to doing it nationally, and what challenges did you run up against, and how did you overcome them?
This is like maybe not a question for me. We Anna, who started DMI, I think really like organizing non-drivers and organizing disabled non-drivers, it really is unique. I think that I'll say personally how I got involved with DMI before I worked for DMI. I have a background in public policy and was just trying to connect with anyone in Washington State, any, you know, disabled activist spaces that were working on policy issues, that affect people with disabilities, and that were disability led. And it's really hard to find disability led organizing in Washington. And I, in Seattle Times, this was around the Week Without Driving a couple years ago, there's all these stories about disabled activists, and Anna, who is also disabled. And it was, they were getting public recognition and they were getting not just, written about as like disabled experiences, but as policy experts. And that is like a really big change. We don't really we haven't thought a lot about non-drivers in general. We haven't done a lot of studies to really know how many non-drivers there are in Washington State, and really like what those issues are. We know a lot about drivers and know a lot less about non-drivers. And so I think Disability Mobility Initiative just gained a lot of traction with disabled groups, but also, a lot of people that are organizing around other transit outside of cars across the country, because this is, I think, a really important narrative that I think just like got a lot of traction. And so with that, we worked with America Walks. Mike McGinn, who's former mayor of Seattle, he started America Walks, and so that was a partnership that I think already at least informally existed. And having this national organization that had a lot of resources was like extremely instrumental in making Week Without Driving national. I don't think we could have done that without them. And I guess like going back to like Washington State organizing, it was pretty exciting this year because we would hear about cities and counties that were issuing Week Without Driving proclamations after the fact, which was I think just really exciting to show how much this like took on momentum on its own, in its third year, that it was that it really impacted people, advocates, and local organizing. And so I don't know if that's because mostly I'm just passing it off to America Walks was amazing, but they have the resources, and they already had a built-in network of local organizations that were working nationally.
That's great. For those of you who haven't met Anna, she is amazing. She's one of the most dynamic, enthusiastic people that you could meet, and that helps a lot. But I think the other piece of it, and Amara, you mentioned this, it's all about telling stories, you know, because really, I think the very first year, they were putting up on their website, you know, stories about, you know, person X in, you know, so-and-so legislative district and the kinds of issues that they dealt with trying to get from place to place. And so, and if, you know, our legislators who were here, you know, they'll tell you, you know, those are it's the stories that they remember. I mean, certainly the statistics are useful, but it's, you know, if you've got a really good story to tell and a bunch of stories to tell, then I think that makes a lot of difference. So, and that for those of us who are, you know, rail advocates, I think that's really something that we probably don't do as well as we should, is talking about what you know, what it means to us and to our families to have rail rail in our communities. So do we have comments or questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Just really quickly. I think also collecting stories is, you know, a great like narrative for organizing, but also it takes a lot of effort and investment to craft your story to tell. And so, you know, it's an amazing way to organize new activists who haven't necessarily thought about their stories. You know, we have, you know, a network of over 200 people across the state that I don't know if necessarily would be involved and engaged in transit if you know, if they hadn't gotten to tell their story and, you know, spend a lot of time thinking about what transit means to them.
Yeah. One example of like deliverable that has come out of sharing our community stories is a lot of online publishing. So one example is SDOT, the Seattle Department of Transportation, released a project called the Story Map Project. It's a interactive website where through community feedback, SDOT identified common like sidewalk remediation procedures and put them on a map where you can kind of go to a specific location in Seattle and see pictures of like the before and after of a sidewalk being repaired. So this is just one example of like how community, you know, sharing their voices, sharing their stories directly contributes to like, you know, things like remediation. And it also serves as like a good archive for, you know, the public, for anybody who's interested. And also, you know, for other state agencies in general, to see, you know, how actively repairing the things that people notice, you know, kind of contributes to like a greater sense of like access. And hopefully, you know, visualizing things puts things into context as well for several topics. Is there anything else about Story Map Project?
I know you got a lot of press as a result of those stories because the press loves them.
Yes. Yes. We were in the news about that, weren't we? On King 5, Cecilia. Yes. Yeah. The press loves those types of stories. I think another really like great part of like, you know, sharing is that, you know, that encourages more people from these communities to speak up and to like show up and give public comment at city councils as well. I know that's how I you know, found out about Anna. I'm low vision myself, so I've always known I was going to, you know, take transit everywhere. And one day I just like searched Nystagmus, Seattle, found Anna's page, and then, you know, now I'm a seminar coordinator. So yeah, there was also an article in the Seattle Times about Week Without Driving, where again, Tanisha who is also a seminar coordinator for DMI, also a wheelchair user. Me and Tanisha walked with a Seattle Times reporter and just pointed out, again, some common sidewalk deficiencies in like West Seattle. So again, yes, personally, I think the visual aspect of sharing community stories is also very impactful. So, you can, a lot of the times DMI will set up workshops and seminars with policymakers and representatives and such to just like speak with them like in a kind of like a more intimate setting. But yeah, once you can really show people and like have the visuals and outside perspectives, like outside of the initiatives is like, yes, very important.
Just really want to underline like why why We Go Out Driving is so important, and that's because non-drivers and people with disabilities are not represented as elected officials. We're not voting members on any of the transit boards, and so that experience is not represented in positions of power, and so that, we see that play out all the time where accessibility is an afterthought, or, some of the biggest issues we face are a last priority. And so, Week Without Driving is like a really, really important step. And I think it's really, a lot of the council members that we work with and that, participate every year now, we see like them advocate for, a lot of new policies, and that I don't think they would have if they hadn't participated in Week Without Driving. But also like, yeah, this is why this non-driver seminar that Amara is running is so important, because it's organizing hopefully new disabled leaders. And yeah, maybe you can talk about that a little more in the legislation.
Yeah, should I save that for the legislative panel now? Okay, I will. Yeah, so we always hear that, people want to hear from the disabled community about accessibility and transit and connecting communities to resources. But like Cecilia said, we rarely get represented in that. So yes, there is currently a bill, Senate Bill 5575, which would make it mandatory to add a non-driver to transportation committees, which would definitely make it, consistent to like consistently hear from somebody who uses transportation on the regular and is also familiar with just, the many changes that are happening with, I guess, commuter service in Seattle, at least like with Sound Transit and Metro. But yes, anyway, so the non-driver seminar series is a 5-month workshop program that DMI is running that there's 20 non-driver participants, and we are organizing seminars that are being hosted by transportation professionals, ADA compliance professionals, and a lot of like land use people. And we are gathering feedback from the non-driver perspective with the goal of writing white papers that will hopefully influence some positive policy change regarding implementing accessible, transportation. A lot of focus on like remediation and such, but also, multimodal solutions that, allow for a way to like access transit when one solution fails. Or, you miss a bus, you shouldn't have to wait like an hour in the rain for another one. There should be another way to get anywhere, Yeah, so that's very exciting. That's starting in January and will wrap up in May. So yes.
Well, let's pass it on to the folks either in person or in the on Zoom. If people have questions or comments, please feel free. Great.
I
You gotta raise your hand.
Oh, I didn't raise my hand. I have a comment, but I didn't raise my hand. I can't figure out how to do that. Can I just make
Hold
my,
on just a moment. We've got somebody speaking here in the room. Were you able to hear that by chance?
No.
I had my computer muted. My apologies. The Zoom audience was not able to hear.
That's okay. This is a question about the intersection between disability rights and climate rights. What's that? Figure it out. We've all been here. We all just pretty amazing. One day, 30%. Don't drive. Will be even greater if you consider all who don't want to drive for climate reasons. So you may not have any thoughts on this matter, but I'm just putting the question out there in case you do, like the intersection of disability rights and climate rights. Thanks.
So I think this might, if we're talking specifically about like the intersection, I think that maybe just efficiency has a big intersection. Because, by prioritizing like accessible routes, I think that would reduce, it would reduce how long people are taking to find the right routes. And when I think about climate change and disability rights and transportation specifically, I just think of, when you're walking around in kind of maybe an inner urban area. I grew up in Kent myself and moved to North Seattle. But with a lot of construction and things going on, I guess like the climate can kind of change at any time, even if you're just on the sidewalk, walking to the train or walking to the bus to take the train. So I think by increasing like maybe the fixed route service so that you can get from one location to the next without having to rely on a vehicle, or even just having the option to take whatever means of transportation you can. I think that kind of ties into climate change just because, or climate, because, the more efficient you are, the less, I guess, the less you have to worry about the alternative, I suppose. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I guess maybe to echo what Amara's saying. One, what's crazy to me is, the solutions for accessible transit and movement are the same, pretty overlapping solutions for climate justice, and they're the same solutions for equitable transportation. And we think beyond disability and about communities of color and low-income communities. And when we think about Vision Zero and the rising traffic deaths, all of these huge issues that we have, they all have majority of like the same solutions, which is more mass transit, more usable, accessible, convenient mass transit. We need sidewalks, and then the other side of that is we know that communities of color are most impacted by climate change, and people with disabilities are also one of those communities. Also, people of color who are disabled are the most impacted, but people with disabilities are more likely to be rent burdened, which means that they're more likely to live further away from transit, but also in neighborhoods and communities that have more pollution. Another huge issue for people, for a lot of people who are disabled and who have chronic illnesses is the changing climate, especially with rising temperatures. Like for me, I can't sweat, and so I can't it's a huge issue for me. And a lot of people have similar asthma issues, and so so the climate change is impacting us. Every hot summer or every smoke season, it's people with disabilities that are really suffering and really need to think about their housing and transit situations. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Lael, thank you for your patience with that. We've got the mic situation and the speaker figured out. So go ahead. You had a question before?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and appreciate the education around these issues. What can we do on a multi-jurisdictional level? And apart from like yourselves and ourselves sitting on every transit board and state agency to try to get better coordination between municipal transit authorities and state agencies that own state rail lines and regional authorities, so that they can do a better job of coordinating stations and stops and connections with buses. And do you have any idea about what we can do about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Lael. I think you've answered your own question in a way, but let's pass it on to see what you think.
Yeah, I think a start is just really trying to map out all of the different modes of transit someone needs to get to whatever transit you're either working on, representing, or is under your jurisdiction. For example, today I live in Seattle, which has a lot of transportation options, and I'm very lucky to live next to a light rail stop, in an absurdly expensive apartment that I know lots of people can't afford. And so I took the light rail to King Street Station, where the Amtrak is, and between the light rail and the train station, all of the elevators were out or locked, which and I'll say at King Street Station, because of the location where it is, they keep their main entrance locked. In my experience, is all the time, which means that at least one elevator is completely inaccessible. And then to I guess to backtrack a little bit, the light rail station is the elevators at the street level are flooded 70% of the time. And so because the elevators are locked, I have to go like a 3-block down the street, and where those sidewalks are flooded. Luckily it wasn't raining, and so they weren't that bad today. But that's just an example of all the different pieces. Even if that was a very easy commute for me. I live 2 blocks from the light rail. The light rail is in theory half a block, 1 block if the elevators are working from the train station. And so I think we think when you're working on rails or sound transit, there's and often you don't have necessarily jurisdiction to fix the sidewalks, blocks around the station. But I think really being advocates. I think especially for, full disclosure, I work on sidewalks and sidewalk policy in Seattle. That's most of my job, so that's what I'm thinking about. But it's those pieces that also don't get funding. We in Seattle are in 1800. We'll have a connected network of sidewalks in 1800 years at our level of funding. And so really being advocates, at the funding level, whether it's the city, whatever level you're working on, the county and the city or the state, to think about, really advocating for funding these modes of transit, like, you know, in the services that you provide, but also in the services that connect directly to whatever service you're operating.
And Lael, I will just add that if you don't know, our friends in Oregon probably do. There is in Oregon something called the Rail Advisory Council, which I got invited to sit in on a couple of their meetings a few years ago. And we don't have anything like that in Washington State, to even just have a sounding board for real people who ride the train to be involved in the decision making, even though it has no technical power. And the thing is that there are a number of people and I won't name any names, but there are a number of people in power that don't want it. They don't really want to hear from the people who are actually the train riders. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to do. As you probably know, the ferries have such a group, but they have a lot more power than the train riders do. So, other comments, questions?
Like we had one more question online, and that is Dave Januzzi.
Okay, Dave?
Oh, Dave, it looks like you're still muted. Yeah, Dave, are you able to hear us? Oh, there you go.
I Now, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Because
we got you, Dave.
Okay. I'd like to thank these two young ladies for presenting our position. I'm somewhat disabled myself. I have a progressive neuropathy. I use a walker around the house, and sometimes I can manage on C-Van with the walker, but often I also use my electric scooter. And disabled people, my observation, are kind of like in a bind. They if they don't fix the transportation, we can't get out. If we can't get out, we don't exist, and therefore they don't have to fix the transportation. It's kind of an interesting twist. I live in Vancouver, the northern part of, I'm not even part of the incorporated part of Vancouver, but up where 205 and 5 almost join. There's no public transportation available to me except the C-Van, which works well usually, but sometimes because of lack of drivers, it can take, well, my last experience was a 2.5-hour trip to go where somebody with an automobile could have gotten in perhaps 12 to 13 minutes. And that's a little difficult, sitting in an uncomfortable seat for that length of time. And as everybody that uses buses knows, and especially those small buses, they bounce around quite a little bit. And so it's not easy. I just wanted to reinforce the idea that an ideal transportation system doesn't need a schedule, because you simply go to the stop and something comes shortly. And any deviation from that is a commentary that the system is not ideal and needs more work, in my opinion. I've lived several years in Europe where that actually applies. I took buses and trams and all kinds of things, and of course rode the rails. And you didn't really need a schedule very much. You just kind of went to where they generally stopped and perhaps had a glass of your favorite beverage while you were waiting for one to roll up, and it did. It's those are some of my observations, and I've already found your website, and I'm filling out the form at this point. The only other comment about the website is it asked my preferred race, but it didn't show my preferred race. I prefer to call myself a member of the human race rather than some subgroup. And I guess that's what I have to contribute at this point.
Oh, well, just on, yeah, thank you so much for filling out, going to our website, and yeah, excited to have a new activist in the DMI network. Yeah, and I've traveled, all over Asia, and it's crazy that it's easier for me to get around like Hong Kong or Japan, being like in a wheelchair and not speaking the language, than knowing Seattle, living in Seattle, it's easier, but in most of the US. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, advocating for fixed route service is everything, I think. Yeah, the like paratransit, costs twice as much, and then you have to call ahead of time and wait twice as long, or, at least a whole day. And yeah, another benefit of like fixed route service is once you learn how to pay for the bus, once you travel around the world, it's kind of just the same. You just kind of hop on and throw money somewhere. So, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm a little confused because, no, I'll just. talk to you.
Can't hear.
It won't be a big echo back there.
Here's a wireless one, just so you just.
Such an issue was made over Americans with Disability Act. But now you two are telling me that in Europe and Asia, everything is so very accommodating to those with disabilities. So are we here in the United States of America that far behind in helping everyone to have access to mass transit? Is it true? You think that Europe and Asia is totally more accommodating?
I wouldn't, well, I'm mostly, my experience is mostly in Asia, but I wouldn't say necessarily their mass transit is so superior to any place in the US. And I think that is the difference. And they have, and also I guess they are more accommodating in that, I lived in Chicago. I've spent, I've visited New York enough times, in Japan. And I don't, at least most of the stops I went to in Hong Kong, every stop has an elevator. In Japan, almost every stop has an accessible bathroom. So like, but also I think it comes down to their mass transit is just, it's just beyond, advanced compared to the US. And so it really does, I think that is like the underlying issue, is that their mass transit is just so much better than the US.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is we're actually, we've got a couple of minutes for a break, and then we'll come back for the last session, because we do have to stop and meet exactly at 3:45 for those folks who are going to take the train back south toward Portland. So take a break, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.